So the other day, I called up my financial planner and told him to buy a stock for me. And he basically told me that he couldn't do that. Basically told me he could not buy that stock for me. And needless to say, I was a little perplexed by this because I've been dealing with him for several years and was never told before that I could not buy something. But if you're curious why Tim told me what he told me and how that conversation actually relates to comics, stay tuned for the video. Regie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to spend a little time talking about my conversation with Tim's pushback on a stock that I wanted to buy and how all of that actually relates to comics. And I'm going to do it all in this recording. So I reached out to Tim and I instructed him to buy a stock for me. I provided him with the ticker symbol for this stock, told him it was a foreign stock, and he was honestly a little perplexed. And he told me, Reggie, I have to get back to you. I want to do some research, but I'll call you back. He calls me back a few hours later after doing his research, and he basically tells me that he cannot buy that stock for me. So of course, I'm like, Tim, what's the deal? Why can't you do it? Is it because it's an international stock? He says, no, that's not the reason. The reason is that the stock has been pink listed. And he said it in such a way that I should know what a pink sheet was, but I didn't. So I was like, Tim, what's a pink sheet? And he says that the analyst that work for Edward Jones do a lot of research into companies that are out there, whether foreign or domestic. And depending upon where they land with their research, they deem certain companies and of course their stock to be too risky for them to actually buy. And so the company had decided, Edward Jones had decided that the company that I was interested in buying, it was too risky. So I asked a couple of more questions and he cited for me several reasons why this could be the case. In certain countries, because of the political environment in those countries, they are sometimes deemed to be risky. If they're penny stocks, sometimes deemed to be risky. If they don't have great track records, sometimes those things are deemed to be too risky. And I honestly didn't feel like the company that I wanted him to buy for me fell into any of those categories, but nevertheless, this company had been pink sheeted. And he informed me that, of course, I could still buy the stock in one of my other portfolios, not with Edward Jones, but he could not execute that trade for me. And this actually stuck with me for a couple of weeks. It stuck with me in the back of my mind, the rationale and why this might be the case. And then it hit me that there are even more similarities between stocks and comics than maybe what I appreciated. And I say that after having done probably a dozen videos looking at the market, if you will, of comics and making lots of comparisons to the stock market between comics and stocks. And I continue to have these little epiphanies where I'm like, yeah, there's even more similarities between these two things than I thought. And I want to break this down for you, but what I will say to you is that there are some people that do not believe that comics should be a form of investment. And this is not a video that is going to attempt to persuade you one way or the other on that. So we're just going to set that aside and we are just going to say comics are an investment. So let's just have a discussion in that vein. And so again, as I thought about this whole situation, what came to mind for me is that there is a spectrum of risk, right? If we just agree that comics are a form of investment and that investment can be, there could be little risk with an investment or there could be a lot of risk. There is a spectrum, right? And speculation, true speculation could be anywhere on that range, right? From little risk to a lot of risk. And so when you think about stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all that other kind of stuff, again, your bonds and your mutual funds potentially will be on the less riskier side of that spectrum. Whereas like your emerging markets and penny stocks and things like that could be on the more riskier side of things. Now, when you translate that to comics, and this is not going to be a perfect analogy, so bear with me, but you may want to look at when you consider that spectrum of risk when it comes to comics, your golden age and your silver age that have maybe a 50, 60 year track record. Those are going to be your less risky things, unlike some of your modern comics, which may be on the other end of the spectrum. So you have this risk portfolio or spectrum that you have to kind of consider. And some people will fall on one end of that spectrum or somewhere on there, and some like to have a little bit of a diverse portfolio depending upon someone's interest and maybe their age and all of that kind of stuff. They may fall in various places on that spectrum. But here's my point. We as comic book collectors don't have an analyst back there that is digging into all of the details around these specific books and is saying, no, this one is a pink sheet. This one is too risky for you. We don't have somebody that actually does that on our behalf. What we do have, just like with stocks, we have a lot of people that put out a lot of content. We have a lot of websites. We have apps that provide us with all kinds of information. Just like with stocks, we have a lot of daily shows that talk about stocks on MSNBC and NBC and all of the the cable channels. We have lots of YouTube channels that talk about different companies and where you should invest and how you should invest. There's no one, if you will, that is basically saying this is a pink sheet, unless you have like a financial planner that is giving you some caveats and basically saying, no, I don't think you should do that. That's not a good move, or this isn't a balanced portfolio. Because we don't have that when it comes to comics as a form of investment, we essentially have to be our own analyst. But more importantly than that, we have to decide how much information we are going to consume, because you can be inundated with recommendations for what you should buy and how you should spend your money, whether it be on YouTube or podcast or apps that send you alerts. There is a lot of information that is flowing at you saying, buy this, buy that, you should get this, check this out. There's a lot of that, and you have to decide how much of that information do you want to consume. And then if you consume it, you still have to filter it. You still have to decide what makes sense for you. Where does your risk tolerance lie on the spectrum of little risk to a lot of risk? Where does it lie? And so if you bring it in, you've got to filter it and you've got to decide what makes sense for you, right? You don't have that analyst that is basically giving you that guidance, or that financial planner that you can bounce these ideas against. It is kind of sort of up to you to decide how things go. There are folks out there that do criticize the YouTube community that puts out content and the apps that send us alerts. But again, as I've kind of already stated, there are those same services for other industries, like with stocks. There's a ton of that. My wife, for example, uses a website called Seeking Alpha that will send you alerts every day, all day, for any company that you are interested in. They will send you an alert to give you any kind of information that happens about that company. And so you have to decide, how much of that do you want? Do you want an alert every day, every other day, every week, every month, or every single time something in the periphery of that company? That's literally how you can set these various stock alerts up. And you can decide how much you want to consume of that information. The same way that we actually have with comics. You have to filter this stuff for yourself and decide what it is that you want to take in. But more importantly, again, how much you want to take in, how you want to filter it. But then the other part is, what do you want to act upon? Because here's the truth. You cannot do it all. You cannot buy every comic. You cannot buy every cover, every variant. You cannot. Well, let me restate. If you are independently wealthy or have a trust fund, then you can. But generally speaking, many of us are not in a position to be able to buy every single thing that is recommended to us. And so you have to decide, Where do you want to invest? Where do you want to place your bet, if you will? Do you want a diverse portfolio or do you want an aggressive one? Do you want a balanced portfolio? Do you want one that is focused more on risk mitigation, if you will, or no risk, right? You have to decide where it falls for you. And so again, if you think about this, about comics as an investment in terms of other forms of investment, you have to decide what are your goals and objectives. Just like everything else, you have to take the time to actually sit down and decide for yourself what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, you are the only one that can decide whether something gets pink sheeted or not. Because there's no one else out there that is basically going to give you that guidance. So you kind of have to do it for yourself. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this recording. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I certainly want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment behind so we can mix it up in the comment section. If you need to reach out to me, you can do that as well. And you can do it on Instagram at Regie Collects, or you can send me an email to Regie@regiecollects.com. Take care.